Chapter 38. Athens was dust and drought, ochre and drab. Even the palm trees looked exhausted. All the humanity and human beings had retreated behind dark skins and even darker glasses, and by 2 p.m. the streets were empty, abandoned to indolence and heat. I lay slumped on a bed in a Piraeus hotel and dozed fitfully in the shuttered twilight. The city was doubly too much for me. After Barani, the descent back into the age, the machinery, the stress was completely disorienting. The afternoon dragged out its listless hours. The closer I came to meeting Allison, the more muddle-motived I grew. I knew that if I was in Athens at all, it was out of a desire to play my own double game with Conchis. 24 hours before, under the colonnade, Allison had seemed a pawn to be used, at least one counter-move I could make. But now, 2 hours before meeting, sex with her was unthinkable. So too, so close, was to tell her what was happening at Barani. I no longer knew why I had come. I felt strongly tempted to sneak away back to the island. I wanted neither to deceive Allison nor to reveal the truth. Yet something kept me lying there, some remnant of interest in hearing what had become of her, some pity, some memory of past affection. I saw it as a kind of test, as well, of both my depth of feeling about Julie and my doubts. Allison could stand for past and present reality in the outer world, and I would put her secretly in the ring with my inner adventure. Also, I had hit during the long night on the boat on a way of keeping the meeting safely antiseptic, something that would make her feel sorry for me and keep her at arm's length. At 5, I got up, had a shower, and caught a taxi out to the airport. I sat on a bench opposite the long reception counter, then moved away, finding to my irritation that I was increasingly nervous. Several other air hostesses passed quickly, hard, trim, professionally pretty, the shallow unreality of characters from science fiction. 6 came, 6:15. I goaded myself to walk up to the counter. There was a Greek girl there in the right uniform, with flashing white teeth and dark brown eyes, whose innuendos seemed put on with the rest of her lavish makeup. "I'm supposed to be meeting one of your girls. Allison Kelly?" "Allie? Her flight's in. She'll be changing." She picked up a telephone, dialed a number, gleamed her teeth at me. Her accent was impeccable and American. "Allie, your date's here. If you don't come right away, he's taking me instead." She held out the receiver. "She wants to speak to you." "Tell her I'll wait, not to hurry." "He's shy." Allison must have said something because the girl smiled. She put the phone down. "She'll be right over." "What did she say then?" "She said, 'You're not shy. It's just your technique.'" "Oh." She gave me what was meant to be a coolly audacious look between her long black eyelashes, then turned to deal with 2 women who had mercifully appeared at the other end of the counter. I escaped and went and stood near the entrance. When I had first lived on the island, Athens, the city life, had seemed like a normalizing influence, as desirable as it was still familiar. Now I realized that it began to frighten me, that I loathed it. The slick exchange at the desk, 2 blatant implications of contra-accepted excitement, the next stereotyped thrill. I came from another planet. A minute or 2 later, Allison appeared through the door. Her hair was short, too short. She was wearing a white dress, and immediately we were on the wrong foot, because I knew she had worn it to remind me of our first meeting. Her skin was paler than I remembered. She took off her dark glasses when she saw me, and I could see she was tired, her most bruised. Pretty enough body, pretty enough clothes, a good walk, the same old wounded face and truth-seeking eyes. Allison might launch 10 ships in me, but Julie launched 1,000. She came and stood, and we gave each other a little smile. Hi. Hello, Allison. Sorry, late as usual. She spoke as if we had last met the week before. But it didn't work. The 9 months stood like a sieve between us, through which words came, but none of the emotions. Shall we go? I took the airline bag she was carrying and led her out to a taxi. Inside, we sat in opposite corners and looked at each other again. She smiled. I thought you wouldn't come. I didn't know where to send my refusal. I was cunning. She glanced out of the window, waved to a man in uniform. She seemed older to me, overexperienced by travel, needing to be learnt again, and I hadn't the energy. I've got you a room overlooking the port. Fine. They're so bloody stuffy in Greek hotels, you know? Toujours the done thing. She gave me a tweak of irony from her gray eyes, then covered up. It's fun. Vive the done thing. I nearly made my prepared speech, but it annoyed me that she assumed I hadn't changed, was still slave to English convention. It even annoyed me that she felt she had to cover up. She held out her hand, and I took it, and we pressed fingers. Then she reached out and took off my dark glasses. You look devastatingly handsome now. Do you know that you're so brown, dried in the sun, sort of beginning to be ravaged? Jesus, when you're 40. I smiled, but I looked down and let go of her hand to get a cigarette. I knew what her flattery meant, the invitation extended. Allison, I'm in sort of a weird situation. It knocked all the false lightness out of her. She stared straight ahead. Another girl? No, she flashed a look at me. I've changed. I don't know how one begins to explain things. But you wish to God I'd kept away. No, I'm glad you've come. She glanced at me suspiciously again. Really? She was silent for a few moments. We moved out onto the coast road. I'm through with Pete. You said. I forgot, but I knew she hadn't. And I've been through with everyone else since I've been through with him. She kept staring out of the window. Sorry, I ought to have started with the small talk. No, I mean, you know. She slid another look at me, hurt and trying not to be hurt. She made an effort. I'm living with Anne again, only since last week, back in the old flat. Maggie's gone home. I liked Anne. Yes, she's nice. There was a long silence as we drove down past Veleron. She stared out of the window and after a minute reached into her white handbag and took out her dark glasses. I knew why. I could see the lines of wet light around her eyes. I didn't touch her, take her hand, but I talked about the difference between the Piraeus and Athens, how the former was more picturesque, more Greek, and I thought she'd like it better. I had really chosen the Piraeus because of the small but horrifying possibility of running into Conchis and Julie. The thought of her cool, amused, and probably contemptuous eyes, if such a thing happened, sent shivers down my spine. There was something about Allison's manner and appearance. If a man was with her, he went to bed with her, and as I talked, I wondered how we were going to survive the next 3 days. I tipped the boy, and he left the room. She went to the window and looked down across the broad white quay. The slow crowds of evening strollers, the busy port. I stood behind her. After a moment's swift calculation, I put my arm round her, and at once she leaned against me. I hate cities. I hate aeroplanes. I want to live in a cottage in Ireland. Why Ireland? Somewhere I've never been. I could feel the warmth, the willingness to surrender, of her body. At any moment she would turn her face, and I would have to kiss her. Allison, I don't quite know how to break the news. I took my arm away and stood closer to the window so that she could not see my face. I caught a disease 2 or 3 months ago. Well, syphilis. I turned and she gave me a look, concern and shock and incredulity. I'm all right now, but, I can't possibly. You went to, I nodded. The incredulity became credulity. She looked down. You had your revenge. She came and put her arms round me. Oh, Nico. I said over her head, I'm not meant to have oral or closer contact for at least another month. I don't know what to do. I ought never to have written. This was never really on. She let go of me and went and sat on the bed. I saw I had got myself into a new corner. She now thought that this satisfactorily explained our awkwardness till then. She gave me a kind, gentle little smile. Tell me all about it. I walked round and round the room, telling her about Paterescu and the clinic, about the poetry, even about the venture at suicide, about everything except Borani. After a while she lay back on the bed smoking, and I was unexpectedly filled with a pleasure in duplicity, with that pleasure, I imagined, Conchis felt when he was with me. In the end, I sat on the end of the bed. She lay staring up at the ceiling. Can I tell you about Pete now? Of course. I half listened, playing my part, and suddenly began to enjoy being with her again. Not particularly with Allison, but being in this hotel bedroom, hearing the murmur of the evening crowds below, the sound of sirens, the smell of the tired Aegean. I felt no attraction and no tenderness for her, no real interest in the breakup of her long relationship with the boor of an Australian pilot. Simply the complex, ambiguous sadness of the darkening room. The light had drained out of the sky. It became rapid dusk. All the treacheries of modern love seemed beautiful, and I had my great secret, safe, locked away. It was Greece again, the Alexandrian Greece of Cavaphy. There were only degrees of aesthetic pleasure, of beauty and decadence. Morality was a North European lie. There was a long silence. She said, Where are we, Nico? How do you mean? She was leaning on her elbow, staring at me, but I wouldn't look round at her. Now I know, of course, she shrugged. But I didn't come to be your old chum. I put my head in my hands. Allison, I'm sick of women, sick of love, sick of sex, sick of everything. I don't know what I want. I should never have asked you to come. She looked down, seeming tacitly to agree. The fact is, well, I suppose I have a sort of nostalgia for a sister at the moment. If you say, fuck that, I understand. I have no right not to understand. All right, she looked up again. Sister? But one day you'll be cured. I don't know. I just don't know. I sounded suitably distraught. Look, please go away, curse me, anything, but I'm a dead man at the moment. I went to the window. It's all my fault. I can't ask you to spend 3 days with a dead man. A dead man I once loved. A long silence crept between us, but then she briskly sat up and got off the bed, and went and switched on the light and combed her hair. She produced the jet earrings I had left that last day in London, and put them on, then lipstick. I thought of Julie, of lips without lipstick, coolness, mystery, elegance. It seemed almost marvelous to be so without desire. At last, in my life, to be able to be so faithful. By an unhappy irony, the way to the restaurant I had chosen lay through the red light area of the Piraeus. Bars, multilingual neon signs, photos of strippers and belly dancers, sailors in lounging groups, glimpses through bead curtains of Lautrec-like interiors, women in lines along the padded benches, The streets were thronged with pimps and tarts, barrow boys selling pistachios and sunflower pips, chestnut sellers, pasty sellers, lottery ticket hawkers. Doormen invited us in. Men slid up with wallets of watches, packets of Lucky Strike and Camel, shoddy souvenirs, and every 10 yards someone whistled at Allison. We walked in silence. I had a vision of Lily walking through that street and silencing everything, purifying everything, not provoking and adding to the vulgarity. Allison had a set face, and we started to walk quickly to get out of the place. But I thought I could see in her walk a touch of that old amoral sexuality, that quality she could not help offering and other men noticing. When we got to Spiro's, she said, too brightly, "Well, Brother Nicholas, what are you going to do with me?" "Do you want to call it off?" She twisted her glass of ouzo. "Do you?" I asked first. "No, now you." "We could do something, go somewhere you haven't seen." To my relief, she'd already told me that she had spent a day in Athens earlier that summer, had done the sights. "I don't want to do a tourist thing. Think of something no one else ever does. Somewhere where we shall be alone." She added quickly, "Because of my job. I hate people." "How's your walking?" "I'd love to." "Where?" "Well, there's Parnassus. Apparently it's a very easy climb, just a long walk. We could hire a car, go on to Delphi afterwards." "Parnassus?" She frowned, unable to quite place it. "Where the muses dash about. The mountain." "Oh, Nicholas!" A flash of her old self, the headlong willingness to go. Our Barbonia came, and we started eating. She suddenly became over-vivacious, overexcited by the idea of climbing Parnassus, and she drank glass for glass of Retsina with me, did everything that Julie would never have done, then called, to her characteristic way, her own bluff. "I know I'm trying too hard, but you make me like that. If... Nico, Allison, if only you... Nico, listen. Last week I was in my old room in the flat, the first night, and I could hear footsteps upstairs, and I cried, just as I cried in the taxi today, just as I could cry now, but I'm not going to." She smiled, a little twisted smile. "I could even cry because we keep on using each other's names. Shouldn't we? We never did. We were so close we didn't have to. But what I'm trying to say is, all right, but please be kind to me. Don't always sit so in judgment on everything I say, everything I do." She stared at me, forced me to look her in the eyes. "I can't help being what I am." I nodded, looked sorry, and touched her hand to mollify her. The one thing I did not want was a row, emotion, this eternal reattachment to the past. After a moment she bit her mouth, and her small grins we exchanged then were the first honest looks since we had met. I said good night to her outside the room. She kissed me on the cheek, and I pressed her shoulders as if, really, it was a far, far better thing than I did then than women could easily imagine.